Welcome back, fans of all things Shakespeare. This is Hamlet at Bardfest 2019, the podcast. I'm your host and director of Hamlet at Bardfest 2019, Doug Powers. We've devoted this episode to the themes that we'll be exploring in our approach to the play, and we're calling this episode The Book and Volume of My Brain. So first I want to address a couple of corrections from our last episode. I mentioned a couple of things that I didn't have notes on in front of me because they just spontaneously occurred to me. It was Sam Gold who directed a production of Hamlet in L.A. in 2017 with Oscar Isaac, whom you may know as Poe Dameron, who said, and he was quite right about it, that when you direct Hamlet, it's like directing in quicksand. I referenced his comments last time and didn't remember his name, so it was Sam Gold. So thank you, Sam. And I also talked about that several people have said that all of us are at some level Hamlet. And that was perhaps most famously William Hazlitt, who has the quote, "It is we who are Hamlet." But also the actor Liev Schreiber has said, "The thing about Hamlet is we are all Hamlet." So those two are hardly the only two who have ever said that, but I wanted to at least cite a couple of sources for that quote that I had referenced last week. So with that out of the way, we have some very exciting news for this episode. Before we get into the theme of this episode, in the last week, since we recorded the last episode, we have cast the show completely. We had announced previously that Brian G. Hartz will be playing Hamlet, and I had actually done a bit of other pre-casting besides, but we had only actually publicly announced Brian. Well, now we have the complete cast and can give the names of everybody. So, in addition, Brian G. Hartz, again, will be playing Hamlet. Gene Childers Arnold will be playing Gertrude. Eric Bryant will be playing Claudius, and he will also be serving as our fight choreographer. Miranda Narig will be Ophelia. Noah Winston will be playing Laertes. Alan Clough will be Polonius. Joe Bennett will be Horatio. Ben Mathis will be playing Rosencrantz and Barnardo. Georgie Parks Fulper will be Guildenstern and Marcellus. Tony Armstrong will be playing the Ghost, First Player, and First Clown, otherwise known as the Gravedigger. Vandy Enzer will be playing Fortinbras, Reynaldo, and Cornelius, which means Vandy will be her own emissary, which is kind of cool. Rachel Snyder will be the Player Queen, Priest, and Osric. Kirsten Lister will be Francisco, Player Lucianus, and Second Clown. Janice Hibbard is going to be Voltimand, Captain, and First Sailor. Lexi Weichsel will be Second Sailor and a Danish Sentry, and that rounds out our cast. So 15 actors to play 28 roles. We had such a great turnout at Bardfest this year. I wanted to use even more of the actors we had. I'd originally gone into this planning to do it with 12 actors. I've ended up with 15, and I still couldn't cast everybody I wanted to cast. So that's a good problem to have as a casting director. So we are, all three of us who are directing the main productions, Henry IV Part 1, Two Gents, and Hamlet, are very excited about the casts we've assembled. And on behalf of all of them, I extend our sincere thanks to all the actors who shared their time and their talent with us at the auditions. And I think we all wish we could have cast even more of you. So, with that, let what I'm calling the year of the Hamlets roll on. So let's talk about some of the themes that we want to explore in our production of Hamlet. There are so many within this play. You could go on more or less forever delving into this play for themes. In the same interview in which Sam Gold talked about directing Hamlet being like directing in quicksand, Oscar Isaac said that it's a bit like a religious text. In that, you can always dig for more. There are endless interpretations, and everybody's going to come at it and have what it means to them. So there's no shortage of themes to explore, but as a storyteller, you have to settle on a few and move your production along from there. The thing about Hamlet is it defies definition, it defies genre, right? It's a revenge tragedy, and it isn't. It's a political thriller, and it isn't. It's a family drama, and it isn't. It's a ghost story, and it isn't. Harold Bloom has said that Hamlet himself seems to rebel against the story and the genre in which he's been cast. It's a bit like John Fowles in French Lieutenant's Woman, fascinating bit in the novel in which he has a long section in which he talks about one of the characters. He wanted the character to do one thing, and the character steadfastly refused to do that and went off to do something else. And Fowles writes about that in the novel. One gets the sense, looking at Hamlet, that Hamlet was doing the same thing to Shakespeare, just Shakespeare didn't actually commit that part to paper. So at some point you have to decide what your way into this play is going to be. And for me, one of the first things that struck me was, when the people of the state are in chaos, the state is in chaos. That was a theme that stood out for me right away when I began reading the play in depth as I considered approaching the play to start working on it. Because that's what happens in this play, right? The royal family of Denmark, the people themselves make up that family, fall into chaos. And when that happens, it leads to chaos for the state of Denmark. So this particular revenge tragedy and this particular family drama play out against a very distinct backdrop of the fate of a country. By the time this play is over, Denmark as an independent country ceases to exist, and it is ruled by a Norwegian prince. And I also think it's important that without that pre-existing chaos in Denmark, the sudden death of the king, the hasty remarriage of the queen, the imminent threat of war with Norway, which has been going on for a while before the events of the play begin, I don't think this play has its full setting and its full force. We'll talk about, I think later in another episode, some of the fashions in looking at this play throughout time. And it seems like lately one of the fashions has been to make it just a family drama. And I think you're missing something when you do that. The full setting and the full force of the play depend on that chaos, that external threat that comes in even before the play begins. Another key element that we had identified is the theatricality of it all. There is a great deal of theatricality within the world of the play. Brian, our Hamlet, was the first to really hit upon this one. There are actors in this play, and there is literally a play that takes place within the play. There's an entire section when the players first arrive at Elsinore of theater in-jokes that Shakespeare wrote into this play. I've cut most of those because they don't play to a 21st century American audience the way they would have to a 17th century London audience. They're fascinating, but they don't really work the way they would have when they were originally written. So I've cut a lot of them, but there are still a lot of theatrical references in the play. And Hamlet clearly has a great affinity for the actors. And it's also true that much of what Hamlet does and says throughout the play is performative. He's putting on an act for people. And the eternal vexed question of whether Hamlet's madness is only an act or if he is truly crazy is immaterial to this question, because he is definitely putting on the act, whether he is beneath that actually crazy or not. And so he is performing. And so there is a theatricality to even his supposed madness. And that leads into another big theme that we've picked up on for this, is that Denmark is a surveillance state. Everybody is always being watched, and hence people put on performances for their audiences. But everybody's watching everybody all the time, right? Reynaldo spies on Laertes, Polonius spies on everyone, Claudius spies on Hamlet, and so on and so on. We have some more of those kinds of things in mind that we will, for the moment, leave to surprise, and you can find out when you come see the show. Elizabethan England was very much a surveillance state, and so that's the milieu in which Shakespeare was writing, and Hamlet's Denmark is very much a reflection of that. Viewed in that light, Hamlet's soliloquy that begins, "Now I am alone," it's just yet another layer of meaning for that, because it's one of the first times he actually is without being spied on by somebody that he's aware of. So that's another big theme, and it, again, dovetails nicely with the theatricality and the performative nature of a lot of it. And also within that is the theme of questions of perception and truth. I mean, Hamlet is clearly the smartest person in the room in this play, but even he has some rather glaring blind spots in that impressive intellect of his. Claudius seems to most people to be charming and competent, and everybody seems to be okay with the fact that he's king. He got himself elected. That's something that I think a lot of people miss, is that it's true historically from the medieval source material that Hamlet was based on, and it's mentioned a couple of times in this text that the monarchy of Denmark is elective. That's why Claudius is able to take the throne, when under the inherited monarchy, it should have been Hamlet immediately after old Hamlet died. But the Danish monarchy is elective, so Claudius got himself elected. He must have been charming enough to do that, right? But Hamlet, of course, sees right through him, and vice versa. As soon as Claudius gets the opportunity to really see what Hamlet is doing, I think Claudius sees through Hamlet too, and they understand each other in a way that is hardly bringing them together, but they know who and what the other is. Gertrude, in our case in particular, and frequently, is still vibrant and attractive and vital, and no one but Hamlet would be surprised to consider that she is still a sexual being and would be interested in remarrying and having a romance with someone, maybe not her brother-in-law, but someone. The only person I think on the planet who can't understand that is Hamlet. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute here. But to everyone else, the fact that Gertrude would remarry someone probably wouldn't be at all unreasonable. Only to Hamlet, who sees her in a very, very different light. And again, the ghost seems to be the spirit of old Hamlet. He says he's the spirit of old Hamlet, but is he? Can Hamlet trust anything the ghost says? And he spends 2 months of story time deliberating that very question. He claims to feign madness, but is he only feigning? Is he just that convincing? That I think it's pretty clear that the people around him believe he's crazy. But is he? And if he is only feigning, who among the people around him sees through it and who doesn't? It's a very interesting set of questions that we will be exploring. And this is hardly revolutionary, but Hamlet has a lot of mirror images among the other characters. Hamlet and Laertes mirror each other in revenge and in action versus inaction. Hamlet and Fortinbras, same thing. They're both avenging slain fathers. Fortinbras takes very definite action. Hamlet does not, at least not immediately. Hamlet and Claudius both commit regicide. Pyrrhus and Hamlet mirror each other in pausing before slaying an older king in revenge. There's all kinds of opportunities in there for characters to mirror each other, which is a fascinating thing that we'll get to explore. There are some commonly used themes in this play that we are not particularly looking to explore. One is the supposedly Oedipal relationship between Hamlet and Gertrude. I just don't think so. I think Hamlet feels very possessive of the women in his life, but that's not really the same thing as sitting around wanting to shag your mom. Now, whatever happens between our two actors in the scene happens, right? And that will develop as it will, and it may vary night to night. But we aren't going into our approach to the play with the presupposition that Hamlet is sexually attracted to his mom. One of the YouTube videos that I had found from Overly Sarcastic Shakespeare makes the very good point that for Hamlet to be in an incestuous desire for his mom would pretty well destroy his whole argument that Gertrude's marriage to Claudius is bad because it is incestuous. Unless, I suppose, you could justify that through jealousy. Like I said before, and Sam Gold said, that there is no decision you can make in Hamlet that you couldn't say, well, what about the opposite? And be like, well, yeah, you could do it that way too. But in our approach, we are not coming into it with the notion that there is an Oedipal connection between Hamlet and Gertrude. We also aren't going to look at Ophelia as the poor put-upon victim in all of this. Yes, she is mistreated by literally all of the men in her life, and she doesn't seem to have very many people in her life who are not men. She never really gets close to Gertrude, that we see. But just because she is mistreated by the men in her life and is imprisoned, if you will, by her society, that doesn't mean she needs to have a wet noodle for a spine. And we have interesting ideas along those lines that I'm not going to spoil for you now. You get to come see the show in October and figure out what we do with that. Another thing, Hamlet is commonly seen as melancholic and prone to indecision. Olivier's opening narrative of his film says that it's the story of a man who couldn't make up his mind. Now, that's a hopelessly reductive view of Hamlet. And Brian and I agree. I think Olivier knew that it was. He was playing to the popcorn movie-going audience of 1947. I guess I'll have to do a fact check and possibly correct that for next episode, but right around there. He's not a man who can't make up his mind. I don't think. Oh, and Branagh has said that he doesn't think Hamlet is predisposed to being a gloomy or tragic figure, and he's not. When we meet Hamlet, he's been through an awful lot. His father has died. His mother has remarried. He's in mourning. He's in grief, yes, but he's not, like, prior to this, he didn't go around moping about all the time, I don't think. He is capable of decisive action, even rash action, sometimes, in the course of this play. It's just that the main task that he is there to do during this play is not a normal one, right? He's been told by a ghost who an intellectual such as him would be surprised, let's say, to see, to begin with. But he's been told by this ghost to kill the man who is at once his uncle, his mother's husband, and his king. Now, how easily could you do that, right? I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why he might delay, and as I read the play, there are about 2 months between the start of the play and around the time that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern arrive and the players arrive and those kinds of things. There's about 2 months that we don't see much of in there. So that's quite a bit of delay, and there's all kinds of reasons why he might do that. But indecisiveness in general and general melancholy and malaise are not on that list of reasons, we don't think. So that's some of the themes that we're going to be working on, or decidedly not working on, as we go through our production. And of course, there are myriad other less prominent themes, but we don't want to give away the farm here. We just want to have a general discussion of where we're coming into this play from. So there you are. That's a little bit of an introduction into what our path into this massive text is going to be. So to recap some of the info about Bardfest, the festival, it will run October 17th through the 27th of 2019. We will be located at the Indy Fringe Theater on St. Clair Street in Indianapolis and the District Theater on Mass Ave, just really down the street, a couple of blocks from each other. Along with Hamlet, again, there will be Henry IV, Part 1, Two Gents, which is an adaptation of Two Gentlemen of Verona, and The Tempest, which is The Tempest will be a youth production. You can go to indybardfest.com to see the Bardfest website, or on Facebook and Instagram, it's Indy Bardfest. And on Twitter, it's First Folio Indy. A little different on the Twitter handle, but that's okay. For Hamlet specifically, on Facebook, we are Hamlet Bardfest. On Instagram, we are Hamlet Bardfest 2019. On Twitter, we're Hamlet Bardfest. And on YouTube, we are Hamlet Bardfest, with Hamlet being the first name of the channel owner and Bardfest 2019 as the second name, so there's a space in there. On YouTube, on our YouTube channel, you can find episodes of this podcast shortly after each one comes out. We'll have, as we go along, rehearsal and promotional videos and lots of other resources, including full productions, videos of full productions of Hamlet from other people on playlists that we've created. But we're going to have quite a bit of original content out there too. And of course, this podcast you're listening to right now is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and SoundCloud, as well as on our host site of Buzzsprout. So you can just search for Hamlet at Bardfest 2019 on your favorite podcast source, and hopefully you'll be able to find us. And again, we'll be posting the episodes to YouTube within a few days of each one's release. So thank you very much for joining us on this second episode of our podcast. Until next time, be well, and whatever you do, do not let your nefarious brother pour anything into your ears.